All right, I'll go ahead with announcements while we're getting settled. Thank you all for coming out to the third of this legislative session, legislative forum of the Hutchinson Reno County Chamber of Commerce. And as always, we are so pleased to bring you these events sponsored by AT&T and Hutchinson Regional Healthcare System as longtime partners on this event. We are very appreciative of the legislators, and they have been busy at work, but wrapped up earlier than maybe ever this year. And this is the first for this session that we have all five of them on the stage at one time. So please help me give that a round of applause for that. Glad to see all of them, and I know their time is precious when they're back home on the weekends, and so that is not lost on me that it is hard to get them all in the same place at the same time back here at home during legislative session. We are going to go ahead and get started because Representative Seiwert has to leave for a wedding of his nephew, and we don't want to waste any time. So I think what we will do is start with some comments about the audience. We have a slim audience today, but last time there were some comments made that there were people that make excessive noise in the audience, which makes it hard for everyone to hear, and it also makes it hard for the legislators to focus and give us good commentary on the important things they're working on. So applause is welcome, but let's keep excess comments to a minimum just while they're trying to talk so that everyone can hear during the commentary. Again, we are really glad to have all of you here today, and really pleased to hear some ideas of what has come out of Topeka, and I also want a forecast of maybe what we can expect next session. So the first question I want to ask each legislator is to please weigh in on the most important thing that you're proud of from this legislative session. And I think we'll start with Representative Seiwert, just in case we lose him by the end of this question.
Thank you. I was still writing that down. Most important things we did? Well, I think everything was kind of important that we did, some more important than others, but that's real tough to answer because there were so many good things that we did, and the big part was we got done kind of early. Gosh, you caught me off guard there. I'm just trying to reflect on all the different ones we did. We I'm on Ag and Water Committee, so we created a water council to study water, so I think that's real important because that's the future if we run out of water. And then on corrections, we had a bill that, to keep children safe if they're not, and it's hard to keep kids in homes and then in some foster homes that aren't safe neither, and that was the biggest thing. I've worked with several cases on that, so that was a real important issue. And then on Ag, we've had a number of issues in land ownership and things like that. So with that, I'll let the next guy talk.
All right, Senator Michael Murphy, you're up.
All right, thanks. I'd say, if you're asking about personal, SB 29 was one that a lot of people call it a health freedom bill, but it's a bill that preserves some constitutional rights that I think have been eroded a lot in the last number of years, and we tried to make some pretty major adjustments to Kansas Section 65. Probably a little bit overzealous. That's been tried in the past and has always failed, and so we pared it back this year, and we got I wasn't very happy with the result that came out of the Senate, but we sent it over to the House, and I was able to work with some of the folks over on the House side and improved it a little bit, and they passed that, and then we concurred with it. Then once the governor vetoed it, both sides overrode it. I think it's really important. It kind of came to the fore here in Reno and Harvey County locally while we were hearing that bill about some of the overreach of the health department and some of the things that they've done, and we're not preventing them from doing their job. We're just sort of forcing them to do their job. So, I think that was a good move for us.
All right, next, Representative Kyler Sweely.
It's kind of hard to narrow everything down just to one thing. But something I've said the last two forums that I'm pretty proud of that I worked on myself or worked on with other legislators was buying the Capers for Teachers program, or just spending more money into capers for teachers' retirement to get them on average. I believe it's a little less than $2,000 extra a year. So just paying back to the people that gave so much to our communities. And then finally trying to get a hand on the overall state budget. You know, the House this year, or over both chambers, but the House this year, I think, spent $75 million less than the governor recommended. So it's continuing to spend less money and just be more responsible at the state government level.
All right, Representative Kevin Schwertfeger.
Thank you. Thank you for letting us be here today to talk. And it's tough to narrow things down to one issue. At the previous forums, it was a general consensus that we would work towards reducing our taxes, reducing property taxes. We're still working on that. We did decrease your property taxes by 1.5 mils out of the 20 that we have that go towards taxing you. More of your property taxes come from local entities, but we did do that. We did decrease your property taxes. Did we do enough? We could do more. We are working on that, so don't give up on us. We did a lot of other things that were really important and significant, and we'll talk about those in a little bit as we go. We got several other bills that I've been working on, so I could go on a while, but that's one issue.
All right, and Representative Paul Waggoner.
Yes, no, thank you very much for the question. Actually, as I was preparing last night, sort of a summary of what happened in this session, there's a number of things. I mean, it was a very reform-minded, a very taxpayer-friendly agenda. I think that the Republicans. I mean, part of the discussion during the election last year was that both Hawkins and Masterson was their sort of message to the voters is give the legislature a chance to show itself that it can actually lead, it can actually come up with good legislation, and to thwart what Governor Kelly was trying to do as far as in knocking off a number of Republicans. And I think we really delivered. I won't give my whole thing, but I will say maybe top item, we made some very good changes to state tax policy. I mean, you have to realize Kansas, for business entities, for existing business entities, has like the 49th worst out of 50 states as far as overall tax policy. This comes from the Tax Foundation as far as that involves a number of different aspects. And what we did in this year, we went to single factor apportionment, which if you don't prepare corporate taxes like I do for our company, when you operate in multiple states, you end up having to file tax returns in multiple states. And as far as the Kansas policy, which was a 3-factor apportionment, was actually very much out of step. Most states had already gone to single-factor apportionment. It makes Kansas, a much more friendly state to be located in. I think that was a good thing. We also had Senate Bill 267, which was it was sort of the overall modernization bill on or mechanism bill on tax policy, which eventually goes to, it flattens the tax rates theoretically. The nice thing is, I mean, the practical input in the short term is not going to be great, but long term, you have set the framework, and that you have things on sort of an autopilot where that we can get to more of a flat tax mechanism, and then finally in the same venue or same theme, the Senate Bill 14 on the continuous budget resolution. It's a real pain in the rear if you're really looking at the budget for the state of Kansas, that if you're going to vote no on it, the question always is, well, what's your alternative? Or if you vote no, we're just going to be stuck here for another month, having to hash out a new budget. The Senate Bill 14 provides for a continuous budget resolution so that you always have the default position that if you think the current budget is just out of whack or out of control, you vote no, and it fundamentally goes back to the prior year's budget, which everybody knows is not the end of the world, is not the apocalypse, but it is a good way to control spending, and I think long-term we'll see real benefits from it.
All right, that was one of the questions that was submitted first and you've answered part of it, but I would like all of you to weigh in on your opinions on the property tax relief bill. The sales tax or income tax was addressed, but property tax relief, weigh in on what you feel like was good about the bill and what could have been better about property tax relief in the 2025 session. Go ahead, Paul.
I guess we'll go this other way. The property tax issue was certainly a big issue, but there were kind of two aspects of it. The first was actually just the raw amount of levy. In Reno County, you're around about 170 mills on your property. I mean, the state of Kansas literally just has 1.5 mills, which is the amount for the state building fund or for the collegiate building fund. That you have the 20 mills that we're somewhat responsible for, which is the money that automatically goes to the schools. But outside of that, all of the other mills are the city, county, and other governments. So as far as what we could do as far as literally cutting taxes in that, we went after, it's actually the mill and a half that was regarding the buildings that we actually eliminated, which if you look at your Reno County tax statement, the one part that you have the state tax is literally that, and that will actually go away. The bigger thing, and this was kind of the conundrum, was because the Senate and House had different positions on how do you the fact of the matter, of course, everybody knows that the property taxes have been going up, quite a lot. Appraisals have been going up dramatically, but of course, arguably, it's because the market has gone up dramatically. But you had a Senate position, which was to have this constitutional amendment that would be like a 3%, which eventually became a 4% limit. The House had this Astra Fund bill that would incentivize the counties to keep their spending below inflation rate, and the final version of it was to keep it at revenue neutral, which I thought was a great policy. But in the end, it's a multifaceted issue. I know we'll go back on it, particularly on the bigger issue. But I thought at the end of the day, I think we actually, worked through the issue and brought to light a lot of decent things. Plus, and if you don't mind, I just one other thing. We also did increase the senior and disabled veterans tax rebate on houses. It now goes up to houses $450,000 and less, and it's like $55,000 and less of income, and Social Security benefits are not considered in that amount at all. So it really includes a bigger amount of folks who, at the end of the year, if your property taxes went up beyond what they were when you retired, the state of Kansas will actually refund you the entire difference, and will do it year after year after year, which keeps people who are on fixed incomes from being taxed out of their homes. So anyway, I thought it was a decent year.
Yes, that was a good bill that we passed and went into law with the relief for our disabled veterans. And I did appreciate Pat Proctor bringing that to us. I did like the Ad Astra plan that we had that we were working on, and perhaps we could still work towards that. That was the House's version, where we kind of shifted somewhat. It was kind of a carrot approach to try to encourage local entities to stay within their budgets as much as they can, which is challenging because we have inflationary times coming out of COVID, and the federal money that's came to the state and came to other entities that is now kind of gone away, and that creates a more of a challenge then for funding for the government, that when you have relied on federal money coming in and then the federal money goes away, you have to recognize that and try to cut back, and that becomes a challenge, and inflation occurs, and then your appraisals go up, and it makes it a challenge for everybody. My elderly parents, not that elderly, but 80 years old plus, and so their house has gone up 15 to 20%, just like yours has gone up in appraisals. And so we still have some work to do there. The approach that we were looking at was this Ad Astra plan to take $60 million in state general funds and use that to encourage, have that as a fund that could be distributed to county and other entities of government if they stay within the spending limits and do not exceed the revenue neutral budgeting that we all strive to stay within. I'm on the township board locally for the last 25 years, and we always make it is hard to stay economically sound and with these increases in all the things that cost more. Fuel costs more, your parts, your grader costs more, grader blades cost more, but we still try to stay in this revenue neutral where we don't take any more money than we did last year. And so it's a challenge, and with that Ad Astra plan, the local entities that took the money, that took the approach to stay within their budget, to stay not go above the revenue neutral rate, would be eligible for some of the piece of pie for the $60 million in the government funds that we were going to split. And so that ended up not passing, but we're still working on that. So I'll go ahead and let Kyler talk.
I don't want to beat a dead horse or anything. Obviously, I'm very happy that the state got rid of the 1.5 mil levies that the state was charging for property tax. So when you look at your valuation, you won't see the state of Kansas on there anymore. Like everyone else has said, I think that the state can do a little bit more. It was kind of just between the Senate and the House of what the best idea was on that. Like Paul said, the Senate wants to do just an overall cap, which I think has benefits, but also I think it has a little bit of negatives. And then the House wanted to do an overall average, I believe, of 6 years. And I just think, we need to come together before this term is up, the House and the Senate, to get this done. This is pretty much what we promised on. And the revenue neutral stuff's good. I agree with it. I think that we should reward local governments for, not overspending a continuing budget. Inflation's been bad. I get it. But also on the valuation caps and everything, I think it changes a lot for like a community like Bel Air, Kansas, like right outside of Wichita or Overland Park, than downtown Hutch. I mean, the downtown Hutch valuations are not shooting up at the same type of rates as these other communities that are getting so much new development. And if you cap it all at the same rate, does it do the same for, say, my district as some of the Johnson County districts or Bel Air, Wichita, some of the districts that are kind of getting bigger and bigger? So I think there's a happy medium that we need to find, and I'm happy to do that. So.
Well, I think Paul kind of hit it on the head with one of the statements in the fact that out of 175 mills, all but 21 and a half have been local. So it's a local issue. We seem to be saddled with it for some reason or other, but it really is local. And you folks need to get to your commission meetings and school board meetings and things like that and address that, because that's where the real thing is. My issue with the whole thing with property tax is as values go up and up and up, the mill levy can be adjusted, but the bottom line is you're getting taxed on unrealized gains. And I just think that's totally, I think it's unconstitutional personally. But I think it's the sort of thing we need to work on. We need to start thinking of another way to raise this money. And we are doing some studies, and we are working on it. I don't have enough details to go into any of it right now, but I think as long as we keep chipping away and keep, I guess you go back and you look, if you got an old pickup truck and you've replaced the transmission, you've replaced the engine and the wheels and the brakes, but the frame is rusting and everything's the rest of it's kind of falling apart. Maybe it's time that you change and just do something different, because you keep putting the same effort into the same thing, and you're not going to get anywhere. So those are the sorts of things we think we need to be looking at down the road.
Well, thank you. And it seems like we covered about everything on property taxes, and I see we got some influential people here from the assessor's office. We had a good visit and talked about different things too. And again, it's a lot of concern of people. Like I said, everybody tries to do their job. Being on the school board and being on township board before in the past, it's tough to balance everything. But I know years ago we talked about use fees and how use fees could help eliminate sales taxes and maybe also eliminate some property taxes. And we give a lot of big tax breaks to companies, that could pay a lot of property taxes. And we export some of that stuff right out of Kansas to other states that give them the benefit of our tax breaks. And that's been looked at. But let me tell you, if you try to pursue those deals, it gets you in trouble. I could verify that. But anyway, that is a big issue. A lot of concern. Probably one of the bigger things, in the tax legislation this year was the property taxes, because it affects everybody that's working or has a house or property or a business. And again, the question is, how do we do it? Because again, there's ways to do it, but no matter whether you tax a business for it, you're going to end up paying it on the products that you buy. But again, if it's an export business, if it's, there was sales tax exemptions that would cover sales tax on food by implementing 7 sales tax exemption years ago. And just those 7 that were completely voluntary that you bought that product would be paying all the taxes for everybody working hard for their families and everything. So it's quite a circle of life, like the Lion King in a sense. What do? You have to provide services, you have to provide roads, everything goes up. And like I said, it's tough for the assessor's office and the people that assess the taxes, the counties and townships. And just looking at road graders, for example, on our township, years ago on property taxes, you could buy a state surplus road grader. It was 2 years old for $20,000. Well, that was a hell of a deal. But we can't do that now. That's all exported out to Purple Wave. And now new road graders, $300,000 to $400,000, $500,000. Well, can the township afford to do that? Same school districts, can they afford to buy all the things they need? It's probably the biggest debate I've seen in my time and tenure, and I think it's going to be even more important in the future, because it takes money to make money, and it takes money to keep everything up, and the more you make, the more it takes. So, and I do hate to kind of leave. I think we're getting to the 9:30 hour, but one of the things I was going to say, go back to my first question when I wasn't quite prepared for it, was the Promise Act. I was real happy with the Promise Act. That's where we gave scholarships to community colleges and community private enterprises for technical educational degrees. And it passed real well. It passed unanimously in the Senate, and it passed in the House 76 to 48, but the governor vetoed that 2 days ago, I believe. And so now it's back on the drawing board. But we give all kinds of scholarships and everything for colleges and university level jobs. And, like some legislative people said, if you can't pay your student loan off with your degree wasn't worth getting. But a technical degree is very important, and I work for a little company called John Deere. And, my job was to go try to get kids to do technical training. And our community college did a great job. They've offered a lot of technical training and associate degrees and make it easy. And I don't know why we can't give them a scholarship, because that's the future, most of those technical degrees. AI is going to do a lot of stuff in business and business computers and things like that. But technical repairing cars, trucks, tractors, houses, heating and air conditioning. That takes technology, and that takes people to do that. And with that, I'd like to close and thank you. Sorry I couldn't be here the whole length, but I wanted to make sure I got here to say hi and thank you for all your support in the other legislators. I think we did a good job working together this year. We're all not on the same page on both sides of the House and the Senate, but again, that's the dialogue we have to come up with a consensus to help everybody. And there's a lot of bills. We have the record number of vetoes again this year that ever has been done. And it's interesting on those. A lot of them were really good bills. And one of them was that Promise Act for technical educational training. Thank you. Thank you for having us.
All right, thank you, Representative Seiwert. We're sorry to see you go, but I do want to comment that in a report that I got from the Kansas Economic Development Alliance yesterday, the legislature passed 116 bills, the second most productive legislature in the past 2 decades, so thank you for your hand in that. Another statistic from this session, though, is that then the governor vetoed 18 bills, the second highest total in her tenure as governor. So then the House and Senate overturned 14 of those vetoes, more overrides than any other session during Governor Kelly's tenure. So of the things that were overturned, those 14 things that were overturned, I would like each of you to weigh in on the one thing that was most important to you that was overturned by the House or the Senate this session.
Well, I can start that because I think I just did that. So thank you. Premonition. And again, thank you for all coming and listening to us.
I guess we'll go next with Senator Murphy. What would be the one thing that was overturned that was most important to you this session?
Well, I think I already mentioned that too. Started off with that with SB 29. I think all of them were really good. We did something kind of unique on the Senate side. We just made the decision that we were just going to. There were also not mentioned were overrides, were line item vetoes in the budget. And when it came to the budget, we just packaged them all together and we overrode every one of them. So I thought that was kind of an interesting way to do that. Yeah, I'm just going to let the other folks have some time because I've already talked about the one that was important to me, or most important anyway.
Kyler?
Yeah. What Representative Seiwert was talking about, the Promise Act, it just got vetoed. With 76 votes in the House, I don't know if we'll go back at that right now or if we'll wait till next year to see if we can tweak anything to get more people on board. But I'll say a different one that no one's really talked about. That's I forget what the bill number was, excuse me, but the banning of reaffirming care for minors. Senate Bill 63. I was really proud to be a part of that, and this is solely for minors, reassignment surgeries, gender-affirming care, banning that in the state of Kansas. I think that's a good thing. I'm proud to be the first rep from Hutch to actually stand up for children in that aspect. Also proud to be one of the first rep from this district to stand up for transgender men in women's sports. So it was good to be a part of that, and it's good to stand up for kids in women's sports.
Representative Schwertfeger?
I go along with that as well. Making lifetime decisions on minors that are drastic. A person should wait until they're old enough to make an educated decision. This does not come between people's doctors and their children. Don't think we need to have surgery to trans people while they're minors. So I think that's a common sense issue. And also another one I'd say would be House Bill 2311 that prohibited the Secretary for Children and Family Services from adopting and enforcing policies for adoptive placement, custody, and appointment of a custodian that may conflict with sincerely held religious or moral beliefs regarding sexual orientation or gender identity. This protects both sides from any discrimination that occurs, and we just don't need that. And placing children for adoption. There's a friend of mine that was a representative that's currently Representative Angel Roser from Manhattan. She didn't have any parents when she was younger. She was in the foster care system and would have loved to have been adopted, but made it through that and is a better person. She's now become a legislator, and she was highly in favor of this bill as well. A friend of mine sponsored it, and it does not have any discrimination against anyone in this bill. So I was glad that we overrode that. Thank you.
Representative Waggoner?
In one sense, I would, of course, the two bills I highlighted initially on the continuous budget and on the income tax ratcheting down were both bills that Governor Kelly vetoed. And in prior years, we probably would have had a hard time overriding it. This time we did. Though I would really highlight as far as the bill, I think it was House Bill 2062, which was you had a number of very, very mild pro-life bills. This was one for providing child support orders all the way to conception. I mean, you had the Democrat caucus arguing that it's already in state law, this is totally unnecessary. But then on the other hand, they would also argue this is the end of the universe, that you're trying to, work some way around the value them both debate from 2022. I mean, if Governor Kelly was seriously moderate or seriously would meet us in the middle, this would have been a very commonsensical bill. There would have been no reason at all for her to veto it, and yet she did. I mean, she literally threw her prestige on the line. I mean, we overrode her easily. But I would highlight that as an example of a number of bills very similar to that in statute that we overrode her on, that there was no reason for her to even have gone that far because we weren't throwing down some gauntlet. They were just very kind of pro-child, pro-mother legislation, and you would have thought she would meet us in the middle, but obviously she has no interest in doing that.
All right, we're starting to get some interesting questions. One of them is, will the federal administration's tariffs affect Kansas? And if so, what is your position on how? And maybe we'll go back to Senator Murphy, start at that end.
Well, it makes sense that it would, depending on where you get your products. I saw something interesting the other day. If you buy American, you pay no tariff. I think that's pretty simple. I think the larger issue is that there's been a huge, of course, we at the state level have no say over any of this, but just as standing back and looking at it, we've been really, the United States has been really unfairly taken advantage of, and we've been paying for it. We pay for it largely in inflation right now because with around $37 trillion in debt, that's what is added to our inflation. So the price of our things have all gone up, probably a lot more due to that than any tariff. And so I think the idea of trying to get trade more in balance and all like that, I think is a good thing. There may be a little bit of short-term pain, but in the long term, I think it'll be better for us.
Yeah, I agree with the senator. It doesn't really have anything to do with the state level of government. I think it was just on what we believe or what we think about the tariffs, correct?
Well, yeah, will the federal administration's
affect
tariffs
Kansas.
affect Kansas, and what's your position on how?
Yeah, I mean, I do support the president in his decision right now. There's a lot of media on both sides. It's going to tell you if it's right or wrong, and that's probably one of the biggest problems in the United States right now, I think, is the media, of how political and how biased it is. But our administration is continuing to do this, so I think we should support it. And until something blows up or goes wrong, I think that's when we need to start relooking at it. I think that there's been some good conversations and good talks so far with the current administration, and I think we'll go from there.
Yes, it does hurt our agriculture sector that I'm a part of, and that's hard to swallow. Like they say, short-term pain, we hope for long-term gain is what we're really hoping for. I don't agree with Jerry Moran's approach to try to undermine President Trump and take the authority of tariffs away from him. Historically, if you go back, President McKinley applied tariffs. President Roosevelt applied tariffs. Teddy Roosevelt. President Taft did as well. We made it through those times and got to be stronger. That's what we're hoping for. I'm just hoping my farmers can hang in there because it's very tough for them, and I recognize that.
No, I think the president has very good intentions. I mean, he's trying to look for America's best interest. But again, tariffs, it's a real, you get into a trade war, for ag, for aviation, you're really kind of playing with fire. Again, you do have to realize President Trump, he'll throw out things that are kind of way out here, but really his negotiating position is over here. You have to kind of understand somewhat how the guy works. But again, it's not really a state issue. There's nothing exactly that the state would be involved with it. It's very clearly a federal issue. But I would say in general, the freer the trade, the better. But again, I think part of the whole impetus behind it, I mean, America got so burned from back in the late 90s when you gave most favored trade nation status to China, communist China, in some sort of thought that somehow by economic liberalization you were going to get political liberalization. I think if anything, the last 20 years has shown that you can have, countries that are very much into a market-type economy, or they'll manipulate a market economy, but still are very authoritarian governments. And you don't really see any movement in China. If anything, it's gotten worse in the last 20 years as far as the clampdown. And so that freer trade does not necessarily lead to political, independence, much as maybe 30 years ago people would have argued that.
We've had a few questions still come in about the state budget. So the budget bill, SB 125, passed, I think this is correct, fiscal year 2026 at $10.64 billion state general fund budget. But despite reduced spending, the projections are that in 28 and 29, there will be a multi-million-dollar deficit. So two of the questions that came in from the audience relate to that. What is your opinion passing this budget, but then looking out 2 more years and we're in a deficit again? How are you proposing to balance the budget? Well, who would like to take that first?
We have developed a COGE, a Committee on Government Efficiency, just like the feds have worked on their government efficiency. So we do have committee involved with doing the best that we can in finding efficiencies and implementing those. And yes, we need to continue all of our work to tighten our budgets and cut the fat out. We did have some fat, and we need to work on trimming that. So we don't have the fluff. So basically, that's it.
Yeah.
Representative Waggoner?
Yeah, I'll jump in. I actually, again, it's something I really pay attention to. No, you should be concerned about it in the sense that, state spending has jumped. Again, 2 years ago, it was, like $8.7 billion. It jumped to 9.3. In 25, it's 10.8 billion. That in the course of 3 years, you have literally a 30% jump in spending. It's not a tax problem, it's a spending problem. And you have seen in this last year that both Senate and House leadership have at least started the process of being very serious about controlling the budget as far as having a legislative budget committee. You still have, again, tax revenue about $10 billion, spending's at 10, it'll be 10.6, whatever. Again, the news articles you hear are in one sense very misleading because they're totally ignoring the fact that we have almost $2 billion or $1.8 billion shoved away in this budget stabilization fund. And so they're when they say, oh, we're down to zero, well, we have $1.8 billion also still sitting that they're not even counting. And so you have to realize it clearly has to be brought under control, and I think it's going to take some just ability to say no, which even with a, quote, very conservative Republican legislature, people do not easily say no. I mean, I'm kind of stunned sometimes how just, okay, we'll go along with folks not looking at the numbers. And if this was a business, you would be hugely concerned if you were the CEO. But again, hugely concerned, but it's very workable if you work the plan of having spending under control, keeping it, minor increases. I mean, if they're projecting 1 or 2% increases over the next couple of years, I mean, you will get back in a structural balance. But again, it does take budget discipline, and budget discipline has been hard to come by, though folks have, I believe, are stepping up to the plate. They did somewhat this year. They're just going to have to do more in the next 2 or 3 years. But again, you should be concerned, but you shouldn't. The sky's not falling in Topeka.
Well, as been stated, it's clearly a spending problem, and our budget process. If you're not on a budget committee in the House or the Senate, you really have virtually no input. So what happens is people who are not on those committees can get things added in kind of easy, but it's hard to get things taken out. So we need to be working on that situation. Kevin mentioned the idea of the COAS committee. I'm vice chair on that in the Senate side. We are already have a meeting scheduled next month. We are beginning work already on working things like that. So there's 2 ways to fix this problem. One is in spending, and if we can find government inefficiencies and things like that. 85% of our budget is in education and Medicaid. So when you start looking and say, well, how are we going to save money? You can't save it all in that 15% that's left. You're going to have to look at some of these others as well. We are certainly looking at the Medicaid issue, not by cutting services, but there's probably a couple $100 million, a couple $100 million in waste that's going on in there. We've already uncovered a little bit of it. So those are the sorts of things that we can kind of cut back on. You still get the same services, but we're not wasting money. We're not throwing it down the toilet. The other way to do it is to grow your tax base. Kansas is not an attractive place to move to for a business or a family. In fact, we've got people that tend to leave. And so once again, that sort of goes back to my talking about the studies we're working on to try to change our tax policy, especially with property tax, because I think we need to make Kansas a place where people want to come. We grow our tax base, and then we'll be in better shape as well.
Well, that actually touches on another question from the audience about how we get industry to Kansas and how we make Kansas more competitive. And Representative Waggoner mentioned one study showing that we're 49th when it comes to corporate business tax policy. There was a bill that came in reportedly under the wire to incentivize data centers to move to Kansas. What are your independent positions on that particular bill? Or, well, we'll start with that.
I'll go ahead, since I was already talking about that. I realize I'm talking to an organization here. We're with an organization who makes their living on these sorts of things. But when we offer tax incentives to one group, what does that do to the tax burden on everybody else? Everybody else has got to pick that up. I think we need to be changing the way we have our thing so that it's attractive to everybody. Instead of attracting one huge data center, I would rather be attractive to 50 or 60 200 small mom and pop businesses. We would be a lot better off. And so those are the sorts of things I think we need to look at. I think it's just a matter of adjusting and figuring out a way we're going to do it. Like I said, it's going to take some time. Studies aren't cheap. We're trying to get the money to do that study and try to figure out just how we move forward. And of course, once you start doing that, like I've always said, when you rob Peter to pay Paul, you can always count on the support of Paul, because any time anybody's been getting a free ride, if they're going to have to start paying their fair share, they're not going to like it and they're going to fight. And so those are the sorts of things that we're up against.
Representative Sweely?
Can I touch on the budget since I didn't get to?
It was Senate Bill 98 that provided some tax exemptions for particular sizes of data centers over $250 million in investment. What is your position on tools like that for economic development for Kansas?
Yeah, I didn't get to answer the last question. Can I touch on that?
Oh, you didn't get to answer the last question. All right,
So
go ahead,
I
please.
try not to take that much time. Just to pretty much top off on what everyone else said, I do think the media or the news that has come out about the budget deficit is a little bit of an exaggeration. I think a lot of the news sources in Topeka are pretty biased and in line with the governor. And this year, both chambers passed a budget that was significantly less than the governor's recommended budget. Like Senator Murphy said, we're talking about COGE. Honestly, I would like to see, I didn't know this, that COGE was meeting in the next month or so, but I'd like to see COGE, Ways and Means, which is pretty much appropriations, in the Appropriations Committee in the House, meeting very frequently through the off session. I think that they need to be meeting a lot more. And a lot of the budget committees actually need to be doing, I don't want to say full-blown audits, but I mean somewhat to that extent, because you can't cut expenses just going into a budget and looking at it and anything that's new money just saying no. There's a lot of stuff that comes to the legislature that's new money that is good. You have to look at the existing budget, and like I've said before, either you cut expenses or you raise revenue, and raising revenue is raising taxes, and I don't think the government should continue to get bailed out by the taxpayer. Families at home, families in Hutch don't get bailed out by the taxpayer, so why do we allow the government? So it's kind of a problem that's been, even a bill that I supported in education, or it wasn't a bill, it was just a budget line item. They sent out an email this week that they didn't get the funding that they had requested for this year. So they told the committee that they're going to just use the leftover money that they had from last year to go forward and continue funding this program. I mean, if that doesn't sound wrong to you, I think that's a big problem. I mean, these programs, state agencies, should not be running a running total of taxpayer dollars that they get. They should not be having a positive bank account other than, basic expenses, but being able to fund something because you have so much leftover money, and we're talking to the tune of $10 million is what they asked for this year. They're going to be able to fund that through this year as well because they have so much leftover money, which I just kind of think is ridiculous. And you take about how many programs or state agencies there are in the state continuing to do that and continuing to do that. I mean, that's the waste that we're talking about, and I think that's what we need to find. Can you ask a question about the data centers again?
Sure. Senate Bill 98 offered a 20-year sales tax exemption to data centers that invest at least $250 million and maintain a certain number of employees, and they're required to purchase electricity from a local utility for 10 years. That's just one example of an economic development bill kind of passed at the end of the session. It was a two-part question about, do you support that bill, but also how can we get industry to Kansas?
Yes, I did vote in favor of that bill. The problem is with Kansas, like we said it, Senator Murphy said, people are leaving Kansas. It's not attractive to come to Kansas anymore. It's not really affordable how to live. I think we need to do everything we can, and it's maybe not the right answer long term, but right now, I mean, incentivizing business, bigger corporations or bigger business to come into Kansas, provide jobs, buy local utilities. And when people move to Kansas for these corporations and bigger jobs, I mean, they buy homes and they continue to go into the local economy. So I was in favor of this bill, and I hope it brings a lot of jobs to Kansas.
Representative Schwertfeger, where do you stand on that topic?
When you look at those bills, you have to look at the fine details within the bills. We get together with a group of legislators and we read the bills together, and you find things, and then in the negotiating process, when the bill first comes out, you find out that they might want a 60-year tax exemption. Well, that's a little bit long, so we kind of say, okay, let's review that and let's negotiate that back to reality. and okay, then it goes back to 20 and maybe 10. And we got to have a two-way street that goes on and not just a one-way street. And yes, I did vote in favor of this bill to encourage more jobs, but we also need to make sure that we stay fair to everybody, and we don't just give sweet deals. They need to be reasonable, and I think this one perhaps could have a little more work done on it, but I did vote in favor of the bill for the data centers. It might fit in. I tried to encourage the with the potential the signed new gas plant that may come south of South Hutch. The data centers require quite a bit of energy. Perhaps that would be a good fit for us. That the gas plant is making electricity. They could use the electricity. There's some talk that the data center might in the future put up their own electricity. I'd rather that they use the same electricity what everyone else is paying for, and that they don't get any breaks on electricity. That they should contribute as well, just like everyone else does. There's some concern about the amount of water that the data center uses, but I think we can, it's still a workable thing. So I did vote in favor. I'll let Paul talk now.
I voted against it. It passed the House 85 to 37. Here's what I would say the fundamental problem with it is. These data centers use a ton of energy. I mean, it's like 50 to 75 megawatts, a year. And they employ 20 people. I mean, it's a ton of energy, very few jobs created. The plant that's going in by Hutchinson is like 750 megawatts of generation. I mean, literally 10 data plants or 10 data server farms, as it would be, or however you would describe it, 200 jobs, and you've literally sucked all the extra energy that was created by this entire, new gas-powered plant going in. I'd use a similar example. There was just a big announcement from the Kelly administration about fintech coming to the old Sprint campus in Overland Park. It's like 2,000 jobs. It's clearly a big economic development win. But those folks, they didn't ask for anything special. They had we have some normal Kansas incentives like the peak thing and the HPIP. I'm sure Deborah knows them a lot more better than I do. But in the news article, it was like $145 million in total incentives, as it would be from the state, and local government, which looks wonderful compared to like Panasonic. With Panasonic, it was nearly $1 billion in incentives, and it's like 4,000 jobs. I mean, you have some of these economic incentives that the bang for the buck just really isn't there, and what I find somewhat galling when these things come through is you'll have these companies. Kansas already has a relatively generous economic development toolkit, as you would call it, but still, instead of that, they want something even more than that. You go back to the Chiefs deal that very well won't happen, but the bill was passed, where rather than taking the normal star bonds formula, oh no, they want a special superstar bond exemptions and things that were kind of guardrails in the original star bonds. They want to ignore those things. It's like, give me a break. It's up to private businesses to make their own decisions. I mean, the taxpayers or the state arguably has a certain amount to be competitive, but I did not think the data center bill, it wasn't as bad as it could have been for a couple of technical reasons that I could discuss later, but it's still just the bang for the buck as far as the amount of energy that's going to be used and the amount of jobs created. I would much rather see other saving the energy, because Kansas already does not have a plethora of energy. I would rather see it being used with other companies that would come that would actually create more jobs. So, thank you.
All right. I think there's been one question submitted about education, and specifically, what is your position on adequate funding for special education compared to private education?
I am on the K through 12 education budget committee. In our budget committee, there was discussion about the Gannon Court suggestion there to try to stay with that. With every year you're increasing your dollars that you're put towards education, and we still want to be reasonable. The percent that they were asking for within that, the criteria there was a 72%, or yeah, the 72%, $72 million is what they were asking for, not 72%. $72 million in increasing. 85? Okay, 85. 72 to 85. In that range, thanks, Kyler, for special education. So we hashed that around in our committee. The motion was made to make it a 30 million increase. And you keep in mind that every year, once you put this increase in, then next year you have to match the increase. You can't go lower than what you had it last year. The Democrats on the committee protested and said, well, this isn't anywhere near 72 or 85 million. Why did you do 30? And the person that made the motion, Scott Hill, representative, a friend of mine, said, hey, we're coming part way here. We did increase the funding in the state fund last year significantly higher in education. Yes, we have more needs for special education. Seems like they increase every year. So we settled in our committee at a $30 million rise. Then it went to appropriations, and appropriations made it 0. And so following that, more negotiations occurred within the budget process, and I did stay, and we watched the negotiations with the budget process continue till about midnight that one night between the Senate and the House representatives, and it was put back in at a $10 million rate. So we did get some of what we were trying to get in the K through 12 education budget committee to address our needs. So we did increase our needs. So we're hoping that any shortfall that may occur with our increased needs, we're hoping that we still have some with the increase that they had from last year, that maybe they'll have some left over. But it was an increase of 10 million. Did it match the 30 that, or this 85? At least it was some and not 0. And we're just watching our budgets continually. We say we have to control spending. We do try to provide the best education that we can. If you look at other states and make a comparison in what we spend with other states, we do rise a little higher on the spending chart than other states. So we still try to be as reasonable as we can. And I'll let others speak. Thank you.
All right, Senator Murphy.
Thank you. It's interesting, we talked for the first about half of this forum about taxes and about how they're too high, and now we're talking about how we need to spend more money. And you see what we're up against here. There's always somebody that wants more money, and yet the people who are paying the bill don't want to pay it. And I get that. We're spending, in the last 2 years, we're spending $1 billion more on K-12 education. That's another $1 billion we've added since like the year 22, 23. I think there's an awful lot of schools that have got a huge unencumbered balance. There's all sorts of things we've got to be looking at. I think the idea that we just need to keep throwing money at this, I think we need to start, once again, we can't just keep looking at it and say, this, we need more money for that. We've got to get back to the root causes and the root problems and try to figure it out. I've talked to some superintendents in the past and asked them if you think that maybe they're over senior moment on the term, classifying, if they're over-classifying kids, and they admitted that they probably are. Well, every time you classify a kid, you're adding money, you're adding more expense. And so I don't know, I'm not saying that that's intentional just to get more money. What I'm saying is we need to start looking at that and see where we need to adjust things to make it work out, because the people just can't keep doing it. We just can't keep doing it.
Okay, Representative Sweely or Waggoner, do you want to weigh in on that one?
It's hard to kind of keep touching on subject that everyone's pretty much on the same side of. But yeah, like Representative Schwertfeger said, once if you threw an extra $5 into special education funding, that $5 is there for life. I mean, it cannot be taken out, and if it is, the state of Kansas is probably going to get sued. There's a lot of misinformation, like I would say. I think a certain party that I don't think any of us are members of kind of controls the media in Topeka, that Republicans are spending too much money, but not enough money here, and then we're cutting this, but we're spending a lot of money here, and I think it's really screws over the voters. I think it really screws over just all of our constituents pretty much by how much misinformation, and I hate to use the term, but fake news that a lot of the media in Topeka uses. Special education was fully funded to what it had to be. It was not cut at all. Not cut at all. If your family says you're going to budget an extra $200 for a new pair of shoes this month and you don't end up buying that pair of shoes and you buy a $50 pair of shoes, is that cutting your budget? No. The money was never spent, and I think that it's like what we looked at. I think that we need to take a deeper dive into the overall budget to see if there is inefficiencies, and if there's not, we need to look in another place. But yeah, I'm proud that we did not cut special education funding, and for people to say that, I think it's outrageous.
The question, as I believe it was framed about adequate funding for public versus private schools, it's an awkward framing because we are not responsible for private schools per se, and anything that is done through any sort of scholarship program is not money. It's a different pot of money. So I would make sure to point out that the interests are not at odds with each other as far as what happens with any sort of scholarship program for kids going to private schools versus public school funding. Clarified. I was looking at. I had seen some of the superintendents had weighed in at some other forum about school spending, and going back to when I was community columnist for the Hutch News, I used to look at the numbers for Reno County as far as total school spending. I just want folks to know that in Reno County, if you compare the 2018 to the 2024 spending, that in every school district, it's up $3,500 to $5,000 per student in just that amount of time frame. The total spending, the total number of students was over 9,600 full-time equivalent back then in the 6 school districts that make up Reno County. It's 1,000 students less. It's 8,600. Even despite that, the spending is up from over 135 million to over 150. It's gone up. Their carryover cash reserves have gone up $2 or $3 million in that same period. And yet, you have to realize, and again, part of this is just COVID, but the average ACT score from the worst school district, the worst performing school district on this, and I don't mean to sort of slur the district, but it was Fairfield back in 2018, is higher than the highest district in 2024, which is Bueller. The Bueller school kids, and I'd let this sink in because those of you who have lived in Reno County for a long time, you have sort of a basic, the different school districts, whether it's Haven or Nickerson or Bueller or Hutch, but the average student, the Bueller student's ACT scores is less than what Fairfield district was just 5 years ago. I mean, again, I think Bueller is a great district. They do a lot of things well with what they have. But at the same point, you have to realize the interest or the power of the appeal for education is you want bang for your buck, but you want to be getting a good value for your money. And where there is uncertainty that additional money brings better results, that you're not going to have people just hand over fist throwing money at the public school system. It's just a matter of fact. And I think the numbers bear it out. And if you get in depth on the numbers, there's a whole different discussion. And again, I'm not on any of those committees, but it has been a topic of real concern for myself over the years. And so I think, again, the legislature is committed to doing what the Gannon ruling has provided for. We're basically stuck with that, and we're going to run with it. But as far as anything beyond that is really up for grabs. It's a judgment call, and I think what the legislature has done so far has been very prudent, and I totally stand by what we've done.
I don't want to ignore questions from the audience. So there was one that came in about the Sunflower Summer Program. It looks like that program is continuing, but the budget was cut and the length and duration of the eligibility for it was cut. What were your positions on Sunflower Summer? Just briefly.
I'll give mine real brief. Again, every program is great, but again, it was originally a $5 million program. It was a brand new program, so it was new spending. It was part of the increase that we've seen. That again is comparing what that does versus all the competitive programs. Again, at the end of the day, we don't vote on it individually. It becomes just part of the total budget package. So you're voting up or down on the total budget. But again, it was a decent compromise, and as long as we can make it work without raising taxes, I think it's great.
I agree. I did have constituent support for that program, that people did utilize that and said that they liked it. We have to keep watching our spending, so that's fine that we cut it some. It was a new program. A new program, that means new spending. So we have to try to watch ourselves with the spending. So I think it's reasonable to trim it and not have an expansion of it because we've got to come up with the money somewhere.
Paul, the first year that was last year, correct? The first year was last year? Okay, yeah. And last year, that first year of that program, it seemed like a big success, and a lot of people in our community really liked it. I was in favor of funding it to the extent of the $5 million. I don't think the cost is that outrageous, and I thought the benefit was good for my district and my community. So I was in favor of that. It's unfortunate that we cut it a little bit, but a lot of programs got completely slashed 100%. So it's good that at least we got a little bit of funding in there, and we're going to try to do as much as we can for the community and the local programs we have here and making it affordable for everybody. So.
Yeah, it's a reasonable program, and I think it does get a lot of good out of it. Just once again, just to remember, so that's $5 million that was taken. So you've got grandmas and grandpas and people like that who are out there on a fixed income, so part of their tax dollars is going into this program, and they see no value out of it. So, not saying that's a horrible thing. What I'm just saying is that all that stuff adds up in time. And so it's a little bit here, a little bit there, and next thing you know, you've got, all of a sudden, you're in a squeeze. So though you see what we're up against sometimes. Cut taxes, cut taxes, cut taxes, but save this, and spend this. And we can't do it all, so we find ourselves in that situation.
Okay, there's another question about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and I'm not completely up on this, so I was trying to do some research briefly, but the question was define the acronym DEI, which is diversity, equity, and inclusion, but I think there's a law going into effect on July 1 as it relates to state universities, community colleges, and technical schools. Can you just weigh in on how you voted? I think one of the bills was HB 2105, and explain that further.
Well, I'd have to look it up to verify, but generally speaking, the DEI program puts the way somebody looks or the way they feel over what they accomplish, and that's just that goes against our very core of our form of government and everything. The sorts of things that they've been doing at the university have kind of got caught up in at a national level, and I think you see at a national level there's been pushback on that, and so I think we're gonna see some of that pulled back. I have heard that maybe one of the universities is balking at it. We'll see how that goes, but the bottom line is you don't bring somebody into the school because. It steps back. I'll just jump back a little bit. When I went to work at United Airlines, United Airlines was under an edict by the EEOC at the federal level to hire minorities. And they looked at me when I walked on the property and said, "How'd you get a job?" Because I was a white guy. Well, that's what you're looking at. You're looking at a situation where you're hiring people. These are people who are going to be flying airplanes, point A to point B, with 1, 2, 3, 400 people on board. And you hired them because they're a girl, or because they're black, or because they're Native American, or whatever else, not because they're a qualified pilot. And the same thing's been going on at the universities. Some of the major universities were saying they were like, Asians have a tendency to be, very hard workers and very hard studiers and excelling very well in college. And so lots of times they were overlooked at some of these major universities because they wanted to allow their slots for people who were not. Well, the whole idea of an education is to improve yourself, and if you're going to have that accelerated education in a prestigious place, and you have worked really hard to do that, and then suddenly because you were born as a Korean, you don't get in. That's DEI. That's what it does for you. And the same thing happens in schools. It's been used to make white people feel sorry for themselves, or not sorry, but feel guilty for being white. You can't help who you are. All you can do is help us how you act.
Go ahead, Representative Sweely.
Yeah, I think the bill number got mixed up. In this session, a lot of bill numbers get changed around, or there are shells under other bills, so I can't look exactly how I voted, but I'm about 99.9% sure that I would vote in favor of that, of getting that out of schools. I think DEI is completely blown up in the fact that it's all over the place, and I don't think that anything should really dictate who gets hired unless you're the best person for the job. I don't care if you're a woman going against a man, or African American going against a white guy, or a white man, whatever it is. I mean, the best person for the job should get hired in every aspect, and when we start diminishing in that by hiring minority or a certain amount of women or a certain amount of minorities or anything like that, that's when we start to get dangerous in certain aspects of not having the best qualified people for, as in pilots or education or administrators in any type of work, state agencies, elected officials. I think it's getting a little overboard, and I definitely would have been in favor of taking that away.
Representative Schwertfeger.
Biblically speaking, we're not to show favoritism to other people. There's stories in the Bible about Joseph and how he was treated at the time more favorably than his brothers with the coat of many colors. That ended up fine in the end, the good Lord took care of the whole situation. And there's a good person, Martin Luther King Jr., that advocated that we don't treat people differently because of the color of their skin. To me, DEI does that. It treats us differently from what skin color that you might be from somebody else. We need to get away from that policy of treating people differently because of the color of their skin. God loves us all the same. That's all I have to say.
Yeah, Deborah, I mean, I don't really, I know the prior year, we had passed a bill on DEI related to colleges and higher ed, as far as for, faculty, for, just various scholarships and everything like that. I don't believe there was a follow-up. Maybe there was something, there might have been something tangentially, but I don't recall really the topic. But again, just going back to the general topic, the whole diversity, equity, and inclusion, I mean, again, there's a whole theoretical framework that it's really acting upon, which we don't have to discuss. But the gist of it is, it really is judging people on the color of their skin, their gender, their whatever, and it's really counter to, I think, a fundamental American viewpoint that people should be, it should be merit-based. It should be the best person for the job. It's also, I mean, you've seen a much stronger executive pushback from the Trump administration, and of course they got, the federal government has a lot larger purse strings in dealing with universities and such, and they've been much more adamant about making sure universities know that there's a real price to pay if they continue on with what is this discriminatory practice. Plus also, there was a Supreme Court ruling here in the last 2 or 3 years that you can't have race-based scholarships, that it's just contrary to American law and just good public policy. And so, again, I don't think there's any fixation of the legislature on this, but it definitely has been a factor in what has gone on in the last 5 or 10 years culturally in the U.S., and particularly in higher ed, and I'm very happy to push back on it, and if we need to push back more, I think we should.
There was a question about campaign contribution limits. I think there was a bill passed that increases campaign contribution limits. What was your position on that bill, very briefly?
Okay, yeah, real quick. I think my name's on the bill because I'm vice chairman of elections, and my name's kind of on almost all the bills. But no, the campaign contributions, the background to the story is that Kansas, the $500 limit for House members, $1,000 for senators, I think it's like $2,000 for statewide races, was set up in the 1990s. If you would adjust it for inflation, you'd be over $1,200 and $2,500 and such. That effectively going from $500 to $1,000 is to adjust it for inflation. There have been legal cases where there is a sense that a restriction, a lot of states don't have any restrictions on campaign contributions, partly because it's considered a speech issue from various court cases in the past. That to raise it, I think, was very appropriate. There was a couple of transparency measures that were thrown into the mix at all, but in general, the bill on campaign contributions, I think, was totally justified. Again, when folks want to donate to a candidate, I mean, there's a variety of ways I think that it can be done, and people did do on both the Democrat and Republican side in the past. I think by raising the limits, you make it much more straightforward, because again, any contribution over like $50 or $100 has to be reported, and so you want to know exactly who is donating to candidates. You want to make sure we had a related bill that kept any foreign donations already banned for candidates, but also banned for constitutional campaigns, which has happened in Kansas in the past. And so, again, it's campaign contribution limits. One final part of context on the bill is that Kansas was like in the lowest 5 or 6, maybe 8 or 9 states in the nation as far as on campaign contribution limits. And so raising this doesn't even get us into the middle. We're still in the lower middle, but this is, compared to what other states do, this is not a stretch at all.
Thank you, Paul. I voted against it out of concern. Maybe this would influence more money going into the urban elections and less rural is the trend that would occur. But I recognize the opinions of my legislators that won the day.
Representative Sweely?
I voted in favor of the bill. Like Paul said, it was found to be unconstitutional for certain campaign contribution limits because it's a freedom of speech of how people are politically active. I don't really think it changes much. I do think it's a partisan fight for the midterm coming up in a year and a half. I know a lot of Democrats very personally, and they said very out loud that they're voting against this bill just so they have a no vote on the record. I don't really agree with doing that. The governor signed this into law. Both parties wanted it the exact same, but the Democrats took a stance so they can hit Republicans on this. I don't necessarily agree with that. Like I've said a lot today, the Topeka media will blow this up, that the big bad Republicans are trying to pocket more money and all this, but none of this money you can pocket or anything like that. It hasn't adjusted to inflation, and I think it's very, if it wasn't a vote on record, this vote would have been unanimous in Topeka. But it's on record, so the Democratic Party took a stance that they're going to hit us in the next election on this, and I don't necessarily agree with that. So that's all kind of the backlash you hear, and all the media is taking a big stance on it for whatever idea they have.
Senator Murphy?
Yeah. Well, it was a two-part bill, and the first part, which is all that's really been discussed here, was the part for the contributions to the candidates, and I was in favor of that. It's been the previous amounts for a long time, and with inflation, everything like that, postage has gone up, everything has gone up, so that was important. The other side of it, when it first came to us, was pretty much unlimited donations on the backside, back to parties and to committees and things like that, and we saw that as a real danger. It got limited quite a bit. And in the end, I still voted against it, primarily because of the back half of it. I tried in Fed and State when it came to us to get them to split it up, and so we could support one and then fix the other, or hold it off and work on it and do a little bit better job. In the end, and it's interesting what Representative Sweely had to comment about we had. Two Democrats vote against it in the Senate, and I can't remember exactly how many voted against it. 14 were against it in the Senate, and only 2 of them were Democrats. So.
Okay, I think we have 4 minutes left, and I have 3 questions, so these are going to be quick, and I'm going to combine 2 of them. There's a group that's been meeting regularly about finding common ground on issues. What are you doing to be proactive in helping both sides find common ground? And what are your plans to connect with your constituents in the off-season? I think these could both go together, if you wouldn't mind. And we'll start with Representative Waggoner.
Okay, I'll make it quick. Yeah, no, you want to have forums. I mean, I have one, there's one coming up, the Reno County GOP here on Thursday. I mean, you have town halls, plus also we have our newsletters going out. Again, I think trying to state the facts clearly, trying to let your positions be clear and be in a civil manner, I think is the best way to reach out to both sides in your district and all constituents. And that would be my approach.
I welcome anyone to contact me, call me, discuss anything that they would like to discuss. Just like Paul said, we've got our Republican forums that's coming up, and I also go to Kingman County as well and into Pratt County, so covering the western part. Finding common ground, we do the best we can there. Sometimes we're not going to go to the radical left. You have to stay reasonable. You find that it's kind of eye-opening when you go to Topeka, how things are, and I think we've been going down the right path. We're continually working to improve things. So I thank you, and it's an honor to serve the 114th.
I have a Facebook that's very public. My cell phone is very public. My email is very public. I think I've turned down one meeting this whole session, and it was because a certain reporter would misquote me multiple times in articles, have wrote opinion pieces about me without even trying to introduce me with this certain newspaper. They've never introduced themselves to me, the reporter that wrote an opinion hit piece about me, and I think they've been very biased about how they talk about me in the media. So that is the one meeting I've ever turned down. Even if that, I will always respond to them by email, so there's a paper trail and nobody can get misquoted. I think that's the easiest thing. But I've had a lot of constituents from my district come up to Topeka, and I've met with every single one, and most of the time we went over our allotted time. I'm very open to working with people with whatever party. I couldn't care less, Libertarian, Democrat, whatever it is. I've extended an open invitation to my predecessor that I would love to work together in Topeka if he wanted to accept that. He has not. I work with a lot of people on both sides of the aisle in Topeka, and I think that the biggest problem in politics in today's world, this is at a national level too, the parties are just against each other just because they want to be against each other. It's not about if they actually believe it or not, and you see it firsthand, just like what I was talking about earlier. Democrats made a decision to go against this campaign contribution limits, and you'll see this same thing in D.C. The Democrats will go against Republicans just because it's a Republican thing that they like, and Republicans go against Democrats just because it's a thing that Democrats like. I don't agree with it. We're not here to just constantly have some civil war or anything like that. I'm conservative-minded, but I would work with anybody, and I wish that the politics aspect of everything wasn't so weaponized right now, and then more people could just have a conversation. So my contact information is very public. Anybody that wants to get a hold of me, it's very easy to do so.
Yeah, I pretty much ditto everything. I've worked across the aisle with legislation. There are certain things, obviously, that the two sides are not going to agree on. But there's also many things that we can work on and come together on. And I've got a record of doing that. And once again, I agree. My cell phone's out there, my email's out there. People call me. I even get letters in the mail. So I'm very accessible. If anybody has any issues, you just let me know. And once again, we're at these things, at these events like this, and that's about the best we can do. I mean, we put a lot of time into this job, so.
Absolutely. Well, once again, thank you all for participating today and spending your time and energy on this Saturday, kind of reflecting on this last legislative season. Thank you all for coming out to the Reno County Legislative Forum, and again to our sponsors, AT&T and Hutch Regional Healthcare System. And I think Representative Schwertfeger has one closing remark he'd like to make.
One more plug, House Bill 6011. A friend of mine, Michael Hinton, who's in the crowd, we had a resolution that we worked together and passed that promotes agriculture, promotes our agricultural heritage, and you can find that information on talkingtractors.com. And he has this nice website that promotes agriculture in the Antique Tractor Preservation Day, August 22nd declaration. I have an antique tractor, so that's all I can afford. So thank you, Michael Hinton, and you've done a great job.
All right. Thanks for pointing that out. Thank you all for coming out again. And again, let's give this round of applause to these gentlemen for spending their morning with us and all the work they do for us year in and year out. Thank you.